Hello again. Welcome back to the Destination Baby and Kids YouTube channel. This is Gina. I am really excited to be here with you guys today to do a little video going over the differences between NUNA's forward-facing car seats that go from 5-point harness to booster, as well as talking about NUNA's booster seat. Before we get started, if you haven't yet, go ahead, like, follow, subscribe. If it makes sense to share this video with somebody, go ahead and share it. Sharing is caring. And if you want to support this channel, the best way to do it is to head on over to my website, destinationbabykids.com. You can buy one of the fabulous NUNA car seats that you see in this video, which are going to be the Exec, the Lumen, or the ACE. You can check out the other colors, pricing. We can ship it right to your house for free. We've got it all at destinationbabykids.com. So definitely take a little trip over there and have a look around, see if there's anything that makes sense for you. Okay, commercial's over. Let's launch into some differences and understanding what would make certain car seats maybe better for you or worse for you if you're trying to pick out a forward-facing NUNA car seat. Okay, guys, welcome back. I have some car seats to show you. So this one in the lighter color here, this is a color called Biscotti. We are going to be looking at the NUNA Exec car seat, which is an all-in-one car seat. And then we're also going to be talking about the NUNA LUMN, which is a combination car seat from NUNA. Now, if that weren't enough, we're also going to bring in this little bad boy at the end. This is NUNA's high back booster seat. This is called the ACE. So that is a high back to backless belt positioning booster. Fabulous car seat, and we're going to walk you through why one maybe would make more sense for you or less sense for you based on what you want. Okay, so Exec is going to clock in as the most expensive of the three. It's $780. This makes sense because Exec is an all-in-one car seat, meaning that it will face backward, it will face forward, and it will also do a booster seat, a high back booster seat option. So it's going to do the most, and that would be why it's going to cost the most of the three seats. Now, the way that you might want to think about this, right, is a jack of all trades, master of none. Now, that's not necessarily true, but what I would say here is that while Exec does a great job with extended rear facing, does a pretty good job as a forward facing 5-point harness car seat, and then it does an okay job as a booster. That's just my opinion. And again, I have a lot of opinions about car seats, so if it doesn't make sense for you, feel free to leave a comment below, but that's what I would say. Now, if you're like, hey, I already have a 4-year-old, they've outgrown their car seat, let's say we had an Up-A-Baby Rove or a NUNA Rev, NUNA Rev, and we're just over it, right? We want the kiddos like outgrowing it, they look too big. We're ready for an exclusively forward-facing car seat. You could buy the Lumen. So Lumen will never face backward. That's why it's a combination seat. Combination means it's a combined 5-point harness and then also turns into a booster seat, so a belt positioning booster. So this guy will only face forward, and it's gonna go from a different height and weight spectrum than Exec. So let's talk about that. So Exec, for a forward-facing kid, we're not going to worry about the rear-facing option on Exec because I do have videos going over that. But for forward-facing, that's the most useful comparison here, right? So these seats will all have a 2-year warranty from NUNA and a 10-year expiration. However, this is sort of what we want to talk about. Our forward-facing 5-point height and 5-point weight will vary between these two seats. So with the Exec, when you want to turn your kiddo to be forward facing, they should be minimum 2 years old and also 26.5 pounds. My desire would be to see them alter the seat to read 30 pounds for forward facing, but what can I do? So they would need to be, for the 5-point harness, they need to be at least 2 years old forward facing and then 26.5 pounds. For Lumen in the forward facing harness mode, they would need to be 34 inches tall and 30 pounds before we start doing a forward-facing mode here. So for most kids, and again, in California, the law would be at least age 2 before they could sit forward. So that's something that's, I think, done better on Lumen than on Exec. They do call out, hey, don't start us to be forward-facing until you've really maxed out your rear-facing car seat. So kind of a nice feature there on Lumen. Now, another difference is gonna be the seated harness height when they're in 5-point harness mode. So the most harness height that you're going to get with the Exec is going to be 17.5 inches at its tallest. So that's butt to shoulder, the tallest that you're gonna get in this 5-point racing car style harness is gonna be 17.5 inches. If we went over to Lumen, your 5-point harness starts as low as 11 inches and it's gonna go all the way up to 18.5. So Lumen will give you an additional inch of seated torso height for a bigger kid sitting in the seat as a 5-point harness. Now they both hold up to 65 pounds, but let's talk about one other difference between the two seats that's more pronounced once you start dealing with car seats and you have older kids in them. The Lumen, if I remove the pad on the inside, so they have a little pillow that you have to use up to 40 pounds and 43 inches. So once kiddo gets past that weight and height, you do remove this pad, comes out. But what I want to show here, and maybe I can tip the whole seat forward, is you'll see there is an adjustable crotch position on Lumen. There is an adjustable crotch piece on Exec as well. However, because Exec is intended to start with smaller children, that extension to come forward to give more room for a growing body is actually smaller on Exec than it is on Lumen. Now again, this makes sense, right? Because Lumen is exclusively forward facing. It's thinking about older children. So our crotch adjustment positions on Lumen are going to be 2 different spots, 5 or 7 inches from the backrest. And on Exec, we're gonna have 3 different crotch positions. You have 2.5, 4 inches, and 5.5. So your furthest position to set the crotch piece out here is 5.5 inches. Your closest crotch position here is 5 inches, and then it has the option to go to 7. So you're looking at, you know, an additional 1.5 inches of positioning to move that crotch belt forward on Lumen that you don't get on Exec. Lumen is $700. So again, it is expensive because again, Exec is $780 and Exec faces backward, forward, and booster, and Lumen is $700 and it's only forward and booster. But what we're getting for that money is a seat that will accommodate a growing body a little bit better, and then a seat that also has a higher torso seated height on the harness. So while again, they both would hold 65 pounds, my argument for Lumen is that it'll hold physically larger child more comfortably, even though the weight and the height requirement on these models is the same in harness mode. So they would both hold a kid up to 49 inches of standing height, but my argument is if you take the same big kid and put them in this seat or put them in the Lumen, they're probably gonna feel more comfortable in the Lumen just because the straps go a little taller and that crotch belt comes out a little further. Additionally, the overall shoulder width on Lumen is gonna be more generous. So your interior shoulder width here, I did measure it, is about 12 3/4, whereas here our widest shoulder position is going to be 11 inches. Now both of these are considered narrow car seats where you could theoretically do 3 immediately adjacent. You would have an easier time with that for sure with Exec than you would with Lumen, because Exec's overall width is definitely a little narrower, about 17 inches, whereas Lumen is more like 18.5 inches wide. So those are just some small differences to consider. Now, the other thing that's similar between these seats that's really cool is that they have an extendable leg piece, which can come out to give kids with long legs more depth and more support. So both seats will have this, and those features can be utilized when we move into belt positioning booster mode. So let's talk about that. When we're ready to turn these seats into belt positioning booster mode, how does that work? Thankfully on both of them, it's relatively simple, so I should be able to show the viewing audience at home without too much fuss and fanfare. I did remove some of the additional padding that is on this product already, just so that it was like set and ready to go. On the Exec, you tuck the pieces behind a plate that's plastic in the back, and then they want you to pull up the plastic piece and this little guy, tuck those in. And then you're gonna do the same thing on the other side with the other strap, tuck those guys in. This strap all comes back down. And then we would remove this crotch belt piece too. So that is gonna be, I have this all sort of tangled together. but it isn't difficult. You pull it down, and then I'm pretty sure it just tucks into its spot underneath. Boom, boom, boom. So now we have a seat, and then we would tuck this guy in here maybe so that you wouldn't see it, right? So now our seat doesn't have any of that race car style harness hooked up, right? So how are we going to use this seat as a belt positioning booster? What does that mean? Well, that means that we would make sure that it's adjusted to the correct height of our kiddo. And on this seat, what's different than Lumen is that if we're going to use this seat in a booster mode, we do undo the top tether. So in a forward-facing car seat with a 5-point harness, you have the top tether working. Here, when you move to booster mode, they say to remove the top tether. So I'm going to go ahead and run the seat belt across where it's purple. So there's 3 different spots on the seat that have purple, which are indicative of where the safety belt goes. And that's just your vehicle seat belt. And that's why they call it a belt positioning booster, right? Because we're taking our seat belt and we're positioning our seat belt over the body instead of the 5-point harness being the thing that's holding the kiddo into the seat. So Lumen does the exact same thing that you just saw the Exec do. And I would argue maybe even a little more easily. Yeah, so it's basically the same kind of concept. This guy tucks in where it's supposed to, goes away. And I will say I don't have as much familiarity with adjusting this one on the fly, so it might take me a second longer. But the viewing audience at home is obviously very bright, and they can understand that both of these guys have this option to remove all of these pieces. And another thing to know with Lumen is when you get into booster mode, you're going to remove this guy on the inside. So sometimes that's not super apparent for consumers, so I wanted to make sure I touched on that because it is a hidden piece, and we would want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to use the seat correctly. So get rid of all this extra fluff and fanfare, and then we'll go ahead and tuck the buckle down into the seat. And now we're in a good position to have this set up just as a belt positioning booster instead of a 5-point harnessed seat. Now, the other thing that's exciting about both of these, as we talked about, is in booster mode, we're still going to be able to utilize the leg piece. And again, we would tuck this guy away as well, just so that it wouldn't annoy kiddo. But we're going to be able to use this leg piece to slide it in and out to adjust the seat depth on the booster on both models. So that's a really nice feature. Now, this seat is different than that seat, where when we do booster mode here, it says on the seat we always have to use the lower anchor and the top tether in a booster mode. Why does this matter? I've encountered some Volvos, XC90s, like the big SUVs, and in the back row, there aren't like very many top tethers, and I don't think there are any lower anchor positions. So every car is different if it has lower anchors and top tether. If you wanted to use this seat in, let's say, a middle position of a car, frequently your middle position won't have lower anchors and won't have top tether. This seat explicitly states on it that that is the way that it is intended to be used. So it will be more limiting when you want to put this in a position because you're always going to need to have lower anchors and top tether available. Now that's different on Exec. Exec would give you more flexibility. Exec does not require a top tether to be used in booster mode, and you don't need to use the lower anchors. If you're not using lower anchors and top tether to keep this in the car, and there's no kid sitting in the car, you will have to buckle the booster seat when it's empty, just so that it doesn't fly off the seat and slam into your back seat if you're driving. So we don't want it to become a projectile, okay? Big difference between the two models, again, is that your Lumen will require that top tether and lower anchor in the booster mode. Now, Lumen has a taller seated harness height, right, than Exec did. So does it have also a taller booster height versus Exec? So our booster harness height on Exec, which is called our booster belt guide height, starts all the way down at 10.5 inches, which is like outrageous. You'd never start a kid this little, but it goes all the way up to 18 inches. On Lumen, our shortest booster height belt guide starts at 13 inches, and I'm going to take this seatbelt even though I'm not going to buckle it, but you guys can see here. And then this would raise up to be able to have that seatbelt correctly guided around the body all the way through to 19 inches. So this makes sense, right? The Exec has an inch less of seated torso harness height, and it also has an inch less of booster belt guide harness height. Lumen will take a longer body, taller bodied kiddo further, even though the seats are roughly the same size. And again, the overall height of both of these seats when they're in their tallest, so if you're like gonna install it in the back of like a Mustang or some kind of car that has a sloping back glass windshield, the overall heights of these are 33.5 inches for Exec. Lumen at its tallest is 32.5, and then the AACE is going to be 33 as well. So you're looking at 32.5 to 33.5 inches at its longest when it's installed in your car. So if that's something that matters to you to measure, you can go ahead and do that. So my whole point of this, they're both going to have 2 cup holders. They both have the adjustable depth. The whole point of this is that Lumen, again, is definitely a seat that is more thoughtful for an older child with a larger body, that they'll be able to sit in this more comfortably for a longer duration of time than they would the Exec. Now again, Exec is a rear-facing car seat as well. So if you're like, hey, I need a backward, a forward, and a booster, Exec will do that. However, this combination forward-facing seat and harness, so it's a combination harness to booster, holds that bigger bodied kid longer than Exec would. Even though that they might state the same weights and heights, we talked about higher harness height and more crotch adjustable depth on the actual seat itself. Now, I would argue, and I'm probably gonna get yelled at for this, I like combination seats okay. I like all-in-one seats okay. I'm a believer in real booster seats. So let's talk about that. If we undo the Exec here, and I'm just going to take it out of its position, I'm going to grab the AACE to show, because that is NUNA's excellent option for a booster seat, and that's a belt positioning booster that's both high back and backless. We will show you that. That seat only comes with 1 cup holder. I don't have it attached to the car seat right now, but you guys seem like a bright audience, and you can probably imagine what a cup holder would look like. Now, this seat also has rigid latch. So I'm going to go ahead and install it that way. That will enable me to not have to buckle this car seat, this booster seat into the car if there's no kiddo sitting in here. The other thing is that this is like a 2-position recline. So you can get it like that, or you can tuck it a little closer for more upright. You're able to adjust Lumen recline prior to installation. So again, it'll have a reclined and a more upright. Each one of these seats in booster mode has 2-position recline. So just something to be aware of there. Now, big difference with this seat versus the Lumen is going to be AACE, which is their booster seat, does a much better job growing with a big-bodied child, right? And this makes sense because this is exclusively a belt positioning booster seat. It's not intended to be a combination 5-point harness and also a booster seat. So there's no top tether here. It's lighter weight. When we do the adjustment to make this taller for a bigger kid, something else you'll notice is the sides are going to get wider. So this seat is more accommodating for a child with a larger body than either Exec or Lumen, and I can prove it. The biggest difference is going to be our shoulder belt width here is 14 inches, okay? So it's the widest for when we're sitting with a broad-bodied child with broader shoulders. We have our belt guides the same way we do on the other guys. And the seat belt comes down like this across kiddo's body. And you would go ahead and have them, frequently they can do it themselves, where they can buckle the belt on their own. So that's another nice benefit of the booster seat, is that usually they can reach over to the side and hit the belt on their own. So it's wider. It goes taller. Our belt guide height here is 21 inches. On Lumen, it's 19. On AACE, it's 21. This seat is also exceptional because, like these guys with the adjustable depth, this seat also has adjustable depth. There's a piece on here to make it shorter or longer. You're looking at, on all of these seats at their deepest with the most leg support, 16 inches of thigh support. That's unheard of. Usually booster seats are really, really short, and the joke is that they're made for big kids, but the depth on them is so short that they're actually pretty worthless. The depth on this guy is great, and this is an excellent seat for children with taller, longer bodies. So while this seat doesn't give you that 5-point racing car style harness that you get with the other two, the cost is significantly less. You're gonna be paying $300 for an AACE versus $700 for a Lumen or a $780 for an exec. The overall width at the widest here is 21, which we talked about. Our narrowest interior width on all three is 11 inches, so that's about the same on both. Our booster height here, so it would start at 38 inches and it'll go up to 60. It'll do 40 to 110 pounds as a high back, but then it'll go to 120 as a backless. I will show you guys that. And the main thing to know again with this AACE booster seat, it's our #1 selling booster. It's a very, very strong option. Kids come in, they love the padding. It does come with a cup holder, so there's really a lot to love there. But I would say something that's pretty exciting for most parents is that it does go into a backless mode. So I think that this is nice for those older kids that are like 10, 11, or like 8, 9, 10, 11, and they don't want to be in that anymore, and they don't want their friends to see them having the high back because they're like old and this is embarrassing, but they still clearly need some type of belt positioning help because they don't want to get hurt in an accident. With this guy, we have this option to remove the backrest, and then now we can use just the fanny component of the seat really nicely. Now, I would want this to actually scoot all the way back to the backrest. It's not doing it right now. So in this kind of situation, and you can use it this way, I would actually install it with the lower anchors tucked all the way in, have this scooted all the way back, and then just know that when there's no kiddo in the seat, I can either lower anchor it in, or I can use the belt just to make sure that everything won't be a projectile in an accident. Okay, hopefully this video helps clear up for you which forward-facing NUNA car seat makes sense for your lifestyle. Again, if you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Check out my other videos going over the NUNA car seats. I've made a few today. We'll include them all this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you in the next video.